Hi everyone, this is a remote viewing 5-year forecast for 3 new SECOs that we are calling SECO 27, 28, and 29. This is our second SECO Plus forecast, so some of the assets we have looked at this month are quite different from the usual forecasts from before. This is why it is nice to present 3 SECOs at the same time, so everyone gets a little bit of the new mixed in with what we are all used to from before. We have done a great many studies of new SECOs that we hoped would survive and thrive into the future, and in general we have found that most of them do not do well in the long run in terms of adoption. We decided to look at 3 SECOs this month that have a range of different functions, and fundamentally they perform differently over the course of both 5 and 10-year durations. SECO Plus stands for Contemporary Investigations of Cryptocurrency and Other Opportunities. Again, the purpose of our SECO Plus forecasts are to attempt to use remote viewing in the context of our economic forecasting methods to determine the likelihood that a cryptocurrency or some other high-tech, unusual, or edgy asset will survive and thrive into the future. We offer our SECO Plus forecasts free to the public to watch as videos on YouTube, but the real name of the assets in the forecasts are changed so that the name referenced in the video is fictional. Potential investors can watch the forecast to see if they want to purchase the actual identity of the assets during the forecast period. We publish our SECO Plus forecasts as a subscription model where those people who purchase a SECO Plus subscription get the identities of all published SECO Plus forecasts, plus all future SECO Plus forecasts that are available and current at least through the end of the year 2022. There is no extra cost for this. SECO Plus forecasts typically are for a minimum of 5 or more years. We occasionally update the forecasts, which usually extends the forecast further into the future. We publish results that are positive as well as negative, knowing that the negative ones are just as important as knowing the positive ones, especially if some people are thinking about dumping cryptocurrencies from their portfolios that look like they might not thrive or survive. But of course, some SECO Plus forecasts have strong and positive results, and we are always on the lookout for those ones. And luckily for us, one of the currencies we explored this month has positive results. For the SECO Plus studies that focus on specific cryptocurrencies, we normally probe for adoption, and that is whether a significant number of people and institutions start to use the currency. The theory is that if the currency survives and people use the currency, then that might make a good investment. For the SECO Plus studies that do not focus on a specific cryptocurrency, they nonetheless still focus on adoption, even though it may not be the adoption of a currency. So, the concept of adoption is the same for all SECO Plus forecasts, regardless of the economic entity involved. So let me outline what we did with this study for SECO 27, 28, and 29. This experimental design has 2 parts for the target, which is what the viewers are supposed to perceive. The first is known now, and that is a base surface that has unique topographical elements. The second part of the target is made up of additional elements that are added to the target after the end of the forecast period using CGI software. We have a video on our website that has a basic description of the Farsight forecasting method as it was used for this study. All of the viewers described the currently verifiable elements of the base surface for the target well. We used multiple base targets, and they all included a mountainous environment with water for these targets. Moreover, all of the viewers had similar or corresponding numbers of elements added to that base surface, and those results tell us how the currency or other asset will perform over the forecast period according to the rules of our experimental design. In our studies, there are a possibility of up to 11 elements that can be placed in a target using CGI software 5 or more years into the future. And our remote viewers are describing what the target looks like at the end of the forecast period after it is assembled using CGI software. The rules of how those elements are employed in the target creation process exist now, and those rules are tied to how the currency performs during the forecast period. So, when our remote viewers described what the target looks like in the future, we know how the currency performs. Our SECO 27 is relatively negative, but SECO 28 and 29 were more positive, and they are for 5 years. SECO 28 involves a primary cryptocurrency, and SECO 29 is an interesting altcoin. For SECO 28, our 4 viewers described the future target as having 3, 3, and 4 additional elements, and for SECO 29, our viewers described the target as having 4, 4, and 4 additional elements out of a possible of 11 elements added to the base target. Normally, targets that have 3 or 4 elements that are added are good indicators of positive growth. We utilized an aggregated version of the temperature probe analysis for the SECO. Temperature probe analysis is normally used to obtain direction indicators for specific timelines, such as week to week, month to month, or year to year. The aggregation method helps consolidate the timeline measurements so that we have one measure for the entire forecast period, rather than week to week or year to year, and so on. This tends to increase the accuracy of temperature probe analysis, and it allows us to obtain an independent measure for the aggregate SECO change. We can then compare this with the measure obtained using complexity analysis. For SECO 28, the aggregated temperature probe analysis helps us to interpret the complexity analysis. More specifically, there are 24 measures for temperature that were mapped to changes in adoption for this currency. Of those 24 measures for temperature, 15 are positive and 9 are negative. If you weigh these numbers by their actually perceived temperatures, then the numbers are 29 positive and 12 negative. For SECO 29, of the 24 measures for temperature, 14 are positive and 10 are negative. And if you weigh these numbers by their actually perceived temperatures, then the numbers are 26 positive and 17 negative. Thus, the aggregated temperature probe analysis corresponds well enough with the complexity analysis to indicate that SECOs 28 and 29 do experience a significant rise in their user base in terms of adoption for a period over the next 5 years. Now for SECOs 28 and 29, the results are generally positive and both are cryptocurrencies. So let's put these SECOs into perspective with respect to our previous SECOs, moving to a numerical comparison with respect to our other SECO projects. If we average the number of elements perceived by each viewer and divide that by the total possible elements for a target, we get the proportion of total possible elements that a viewer perceives. Then, we can average that proportion across all of the viewers to get an overall index for the currency that ranges from 0 to 1. An index number of 1 would mean that the viewers perceived every possible element that could be used in a forecast, and that means that the currency would be a very popular one and would be adopted by an exceptionally large community. An index number of 0 would mean the exact opposite, which is that the viewers perceived 0 additional elements over and above the base surface, which would also mean that the currency would be expected to perform badly in terms of adoption. For our SECO 1 currency, that index number is 0.66. For SECO 2, that index number is 0.725. For SECO 3, 0.575. SECO 4, that index number is 0.567. SECO 6, that index number is 0.389, SECO 9, 0.472, SECO 11, 0.413, SECO 14, 0.35, SECO 15, 0.444, SECO 16, 0.35, SECO 17, 0.392, SECO 19, that number is 0.45, SECO 20, 0.35, SECO 22, 0.433, SECO 25, 0.433, SECO 28, 0.370, and for SECO 29, that number is 0.444. When we combine with the positive indicators for aggregate temperature probe analysis, this indicates a positive outlook for SECO 28 and 29 for the 5-year period between May 1st, 2022 and April 30th, 2027. But especially with respect to SECO 29, timing may be an issue. which I will explain in a minute. So our remote viewing results are positive for SECOs 28 and 29 in terms of adoption, but this does not guarantee that these SECOs will perform well over the next 5 years. However, given that we now have multiple remote viewing sessions done by very experienced remote viewers that all indicate that the SECOs' future performances are strong, this suggests that the future timelines for these SECOs are generally positive. My own thoughts is that paying attention to the ecosystem of SECOs 28 and 29 is a good idea. But remember that this is a 5-year forecast, so adjust your expectations for the long term. As mentioned briefly before, SECO 28 and 29 did yield similar indicators of overall positive growth or a significant rise in adoption. However, SECO 28 did not have a strong noticeable divergence spike like SECO 29 does. SECO 28 does, however, help us understand the overall potential in a more generalized cryptocurrency realm. Once you know the identity of SECO 28, you will better understand our perspective in terms of the timing of greatest potential for cryptocurrency rises and declines. In general, for SECO 28, our results suggest that there will be significant volatility over the next 5 years, despite the general trend of moving upwards in the forecast. Now, SECO 29 had negative results up until approximately mid-2025, when all 3 remote viewers perceive a strong rise in adoption. This would then suggest that this cryptocurrency will then find some applicable use or standing in society around this time that makes the adoption level rise significantly. Our remote viewing data suggests that anyone interested in SECO 29 might want to get involved before things take off in 2025. And remember our disclaimer, no one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor, so anything that anyone at Farsight does that relates to using remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the performance, however defined, or selling prices of cryptocurrencies, stocks, commodities, or anything else, is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone doing so are doing investments at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees or warranties being made, either expressed or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and we at Farsight believe that after we do this for a while, it will be very hard for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. As we have said in the past, may you follow your own intuitions, make wise investment decisions, and become rich. Thank you for supporting our efforts at Farsight. Together, we will change the world for the better. I'm Aziz Brown from Farsight.